All right, but little Ezekiel, he's quite the character. But at one point, he just got as serious as can be, and it was like, why don't we just stay here? So I mean, in a 6-year-old mind, it's just like, why are we going? So anyway, and I stepped off that plane in 30-degree weather, and I was thinking, Ezekiel was right. Why didn't we just stay there? But it's amazing how quick you can get used to a climate, right? But we are refreshed and excited about being back, and excited about springtime and the warmer weather. And God gave us a reprieve there. Yesterday we saw 73 in this area. I think was amazing, right? Did it set a record? Does anybody know if it set a record? It did set a record. Okay, all right. Yeah, no, it was really a great time, and we do thank the church for the time off, and we will hit the ground running here. All right. So we got a word on the screen here. And I really, there's part of me that just is kind of blown away by many aspects of the message this morning, because a lot of things that I thought about this word, and the word is Christian. I'm sorry, I forgot the video doesn't hit our wall yet, but about the word Christian. A lot of things that I thought aren't exactly true. They're not exactly wrong. All right, but my definition, my idea of the word, my perception of the word has not always been correct. And so we're going to be looking at the concept of Christian the next few weeks, and so I've entitled it Christian Part 1. And here's the thing. There's a song. It's a pretty popular song in the day, and it's called "Walking in Memphis." How many's ever heard that song, "Walking in Memphis"? I'm surprised many of you have heard that song. There's a line in the song that's really telling, and it is, "Are you a Christian?" And he replies, "Ma'am, I am tonight." and I always found that kind of a curious, as if, because you either are a Christian or you aren't a Christian, and it kind of depends on how you believe and what you believe. But the fact is we know, all right, we know what things are. Give me that first screen if I could, Ashley. All right, and we know what a fill in the blank is, all right? We know what a American is, do we not? All right, and we know what a Mexican is. We know what that is, right? We know what what they look like, what they talk like. All right, some of you just got really nervous there when all right, so we know what a Canadian is. I was surprised because we kind of had an extended stay down there in Mexico, and so we really knew what, you obviously, it was when you saw a Mexican, all right, you knew they were Mexican, right? All right, but when you saw gringos, okay, what they recalled us as gringos, you automatically think they're Americans. But I'm guessing here, and this is just anecdotal, this is just my own experience, but I'm guessing out of the white Caucasians that we saw down, and there is a lot in that area, okay? They've just kind of adopted that area, but I'm guessing 2 out of 3 of the people we saw down there are Canadians. It's kind of hard to tell between an American and a Canadian, especially if they've been there a while, because, you always think that Canadians have no sun at all, so they have no but if they've lived there any time at all, they tan just like Americans do. It's amazing, all right? All right, so, but honestly, I'd say 2 out of 3, am I crazy there? 2 out of 3 of the gringos that are down there are Canadians, but you can't tell until they open their mouth, eh? You know, I mean, they just got that north accent and they everything, and they kind of chop off their vowels, and I know that's way too deep. But so yeah, we can tell who people are either by the way they look or the way they talk or the way they act. All right, and the relation I'm trying to make here is it's hard to tell what a Christian is. We can tell they're American, they're Mexican, they're Canadian, might not know right at first, but as soon as they talk, there's things that you can tell that, where they're from or where they're coming from. But when it comes to Christian, you can ask 10 different people what a Christian is, and you'll get 8 different answers. And you know what I'm talking about, right? Because some of them say, well, hey, I was born in America. Of course I'm a Christian. Some of them literally think that's the definition, is that, I was born that way. It's part of, where I was born, all right? Others will say, you know what, I got baptized when I was a baby. I didn't have anything to do with it. My parents did it, but it made me a Christian. Or I got baptized. And me personally, my personal testimony is I was baptized as a baby in a Methodist church. And then at 12 years old, I went through a class called confirmation. I didn't know what I was being confirmed into. I had no idea. Even after the class, I had no idea what confirmation meant. But I went through the classes and I got baptized again, and of course the definition of baptism wasn't what we know it to be today, and so I got sprinkled, and then I went through confirmation, and I got sprinkled again, and then I got saved, and I got dipped. All right, so I went on, so technically, depending on people's definition, I've been baptized 3 times. And I'm wondering, I'm hoping, one of them took, no, I'm kidding. All right, so, because some of them believe, no, you got to be baptized to be a Christian. Other people, they believe that being a Christian has everything to do with what you believe. Others believe it's how you behave. Some believe it's both. So if you want to be a Christian, you got to get on board with a belief system or a behavior system or both. And then there's some that think they got the corner on the market of Christian. So a lot of people claim it, but only we are the true Christian. And that gets into that legalistic attitude about Christians. And you see these people that they're all for Jesus, but they don't want to have anything to do with people who call themselves Christian. And maybe we've earned some of that, because they basically say, yeah, no, I have no problem with Jesus, but Christians, I mean, they can be judgmental. They can. Do we have that screen? They can be judgmental. They can be Bible thumpers, hateful, homophobic, critical. I mean, that's what they think Christian is. And perhaps there's part of Christianity that has earned that negative connotation. All right? But the backdrop to the word. Oh yeah. I even got 2 backdrops in here too, by the way, so I'll do better on the next one. The backdrop to the word Christian. And this may shock you, this may surprise you, this may just be anecdotal, and maybe just an interesting side note. But Christian is only used 3 times in the Bible. That's it. So when we think of the word Christian, the origin of it is from outside of the church. And when we look at the origin, the followers of Christ never referred to themselves as Christian. Now, this is not an anti-Christian, the word the word itself, Christian. This sermon is not anti-Christian. You're not going to leave here saying the preacher never wants us to use the word Christian again. No, that's not what this is all about. But it is worthy of noting where the word come from and how it's used, because oftentimes we get lumped in with groups that maybe perhaps we don't want lumped in with. So here's the thing. The word originally started out as a derogatory term. All right? Now, and again, I say, it came from outside of the church, people who were not followers of Christ. Early on, it was called the way. You've heard me say that several times, but it was called the way. All right, people of the way, and they weren't, they had no other way to refer to them, and so even people who were of the way said, "Oh, you're of the way." They would use that term. But the real term that they use constantly about themselves, and we'll be talking about this a little more in depth here as we go on, but was disciple. So, but the word Christian was, they think it originated with Nero, the Caesar. All right, Nero, it was a real character, hated Christians, burned his own town down. All right, and when that backfired on him, he was so crazy. Nero didn't have a hair on his body. Okay, not a hair. He didn't have eyebrows. He didn't have eyelashes. Bald as a cue ball. Okay, and they believe it was because he was raised in a palace, and they had tried plumbing, and he was drinking water out of lead pipes, which, the guy was crazy. He was literally nuts, okay? And so he thinking, you know what, we need to start all over. And so he actually burnt Rome down. And when it realized, oh, that wasn't a smart thing to do, he blamed it on the Christians. But Nero is given the credit for the terminology first. And in what Nero did, and several of the Caesars did this, okay? Several of the Caesars would give nicknames to subsets in society. But it was a form of satire. It was to identify, these weirdos, as opposed, because if you weren't Roman royalty, you were a weirdo. You were a subset. You were less than society. And so he would always nickname them. Now, they did not realize, at least they believe that Nero did not realize, that Christ is a title and not a person's name. Okay, so Christ means Messiah. So it is a title, but they just thought, some people are referred to by one name with an explanatory phrase afterward. So it would be, Mark, the son of John. So his name's Mark. He's known as Mark. Everybody calls him Mark. But if you need to explain exactly who you're talking about, it's the son of John. And then that's how it evolves into Johnson, son of John, Johnson. That's how he got his last name, was Johnson. And so on and on it goes. There's Mark the smith. Maybe he was a goldsmith. Maybe he was a blacksmith. But he was a smith. So it's Mark Smith. And now all of a sudden, the name evolution is kind of taking on here. And so some people have two names now. Just automatically, the population of the world is getting up there, and we're looking into the millions, perhaps a billion by now, and so people are adopting two names, and they actually didn't realize that Christ was a title, not a name, so they just went, he's one of those Christians, followers of the guy Christ. And thinking it was a name. And so it was a derogatory term because Christ was a troublemaker. No one, in their realm, in their culture, in their society, no one liked Christ. He was a troublemaker that caused big times. Pontius Pilate finally had to do away with him, and they were all for that, and he was just to them a footnote in history. And so the Christians. And so that's kind of, it was just a nickname. It was kind of like rednecks. Okay, right? And it was kind of like deadheads. It was started out as derogatory terms, but then it's embraced. And the country people now, hey, I'm a redneck. They sing about it, they talk about it, there's songs about it. They're proud to be a redneck, Followers of the Grateful Dead. I'm a deadhead, you can tell. Look at all my tie-dye t-shirts. They all say deadhead on it, They just embrace the name. And that's exactly what Christians did. So there's nothing wrong with the name. We embrace the name. We wore the name proudly, but the origin was from outside of the way, and was originally a derogatory nickname, meant as satire of a man who who had been crucified. So in their mind he was a joke, and it was over, and he was dead, and they don't believe any of those stories of resurrection or anything like that. And so they didn't understand that it was a title of the Messiah, and so they nicknamed us this. So the dynamic is this: there was this large following, and I'll give you another backdrop. The backdrop of when they were first called Christian. All right? And that's in Acts 11:26. And when they found him, this is Paul, we'll talk about that real in-depthly here. When they found him, he brought him to Antioch, and it came to pass that a whole year they assembled themselves with the church and taught much people, and the disciples were called Christian first at Antioch. So there's this large following of people of the way, and they are given the nickname Christian by people outside of the church. Now, the backdrop is this large following of the way came from Jerusalem and settled in Antioch. You remember, if you know your Bible, or even if you don't, there's a story where Jesus had been, died, buried, crucified, and then he rose again. And there's just this large onslaught of believers. And if you'd seen a person been crucified, and then in a few days you see him up walking around alive and well, except for a few scars, you're going to believe. All right, so there's a large onslaught of believers, and the ruling crowd, the ruling Jews, all right, the religious crowd, realized this is a huge mistake. We're not sure what happened. We're not sure how they did it. They did everything but believe he was the Messiah. So they're trying to blame shift, not sure. And they believe one scripture says they believe to this day that the disciples stole the body and got a body double. All right, that's what they, and so all Rome wants is peace and quiet, and quit squabbling amongst yourselves. And of course, there is a faction of the Pharisees that were honest with themselves and honest with God, and they said, you know what? Jesus was the Messiah. And many of the chief rulers believed, Acts tells us. Many of them believed. So you've got people who are in the ruling courts, all right, the Pharisees and Sadducees, doctors and lawyers, who are now believers and followers of Christ, and they're part of the way. Then you've got the other half who are dead set against the way and believe it's all a sham. So whereas they are all Jews and all going to the temple, there is a half that are dead set against the other half. And you can understand that. You can relate to that. I mean, we see politically the nation's so divided and divisive, and there's certain subjects you just don't talk about. And, when it comes to, maybe it's masks, maybe it's, I'm a masker, I'm not a masker, I get vaccines, I don't get vaccines. It's just, very passionate about what they believe. And the fact is that they were in the same ruling groups, the same temple, but they were opposed in this certain subject. Okay, so that's where he's at here. And again, James, the half-brother of Jesus, who wasn't even a believer until he saw his brother raised from the dead. All right, so I wouldn't believe my brother was the Messiah unless I saw him die and then raised from the dead. That might convince me. Man, probably not with my brother. But anyway, James finally believed after he saw his brother raised from the dead. He was at the cross with his mom when Jesus died, and then he met with Jesus. And James becomes the pastor of the church at Jerusalem. But he is given a kind of a royal treatment. I don't know if there was a similarity, a family resemblance, but nevertheless, he rises to the top as the leader of the church in Jerusalem. All right, so as the leader of the church in Jerusalem, half of the Pharisees believe, the other half are staunchly against it, but for whatever reason, James has this great reputation, and James, half-brother of Jesus, he's known as James the Just. I mean, in other words, this man, he was the real deal. Everybody liked him, everybody loved him, and he was given certain liberties. He could come and go like a priest, and he was the leader of the way. And so that's the kind of the dynamic of the world in Jerusalem at that time, and the Romans now get riled up over the way because the half of the Pharisees, the ruling crowd that don't believe Jesus is the Messiah, undermine the way and get the Romans shook up, and they think that the Romans think that the way is problematic. And so there's the stoning of Stephen. The Pharisees got Rome all shook up. They were allowed to stone this guy, and persecution came down on the church. Rome hated the way because they want peace and quiet, and they saw them as the problem, even amongst the Jews, that the way is causing problems, and the Jews are fighting amongst themselves, and so they want to get rid of the way, and this huge persecution comes down, and Christians scatter everywhere. All right? And God uses that persecution to get the disciples of Christ to do what they were told to do, go into all the world and preach the gospel. And so they take off, and a large group settle in Antioch. Now, the backdrop to Antioch, because everybody loves the backdrop to Antioch is they have a large synagogue there. All these Jews come infiltrating into the synagogue, come from Jerusalem. They're all believers in the way. And the church is starting to grow, and there's a lot. Now, the culture in Antioch, it's Greek. And the Greeks are thirsty for knowledge. They're thirsty for new thinking. And the teachings of Christ were exactly that. They fit the bill. So all these people show up called the Way, and they're teaching this new way of thinking, that what Jesus taught. And Greeks are getting saved like crazy. James, who survived the persecution, and there's still a good-sized church in Jerusalem, James, pastor of Jerusalem, half-brother of Jesus, he finds out that there's this mega church in Antioch. So he sends Barnabas to Antioch to make sure things are on the right track. to make sure they're doctrinally straight. So Barnabas goes from Jerusalem. Barnabas, you go check them out, make sure things are going good. They're still not, James is even so Jewish, he's still kind of thinking, well, you got to keep the law, but no, you just got to believe in Jesus, and he's not real sure. Barnabas gets there and realizes he needs somebody that knows Greeks. 10 years ago, there was a guy who was an ex-Pharisee who Jesus knocked off his camel and appeared unto him, and he got blinded, and then Jesus gave him his sight, and he preached like no one ever preached. He had boldness. He was persecuting the church, and then he turned right around after seeing Jesus, and he's preaching for Jesus. His name was Paul. He knows the culture. He knows the language. He's a super sharp guy. I need to look him up. And Paul's been sitting on the sideline in Tarsus for 10 years. The church at Jerusalem wanted to just ignore him, and he was a troublemaker, and we don't trust him. But Barnabas is saying, here's a mega church here, and they don't know what they're doing, and I don't know what to do with them. And so Barnabas goes to Tarsus, and when he had found him, he brought him into Antioch. This guy knows the language. He knows Greek. He knows the culture. He knows these people. And it came to pass that a whole year they assembled themselves with the church. He straightened them all out. Paul and Barnabas, and by the way, if you read Acts and read it really close, you're going to see where it's Barnabas and Paul. Barnabas and Saul, but Barnabas and Paul. They refer to them several times, Barnabas and Paul. And then there's a switch, and it's Paul and Barnabas. Paul actually took over, rose to the top as the supreme leader. And they were first, and the disciples, that's what they called themselves, were first called Christians, a satire nickname, all right, at Antioch. Because Antioch's saying, who are all these people? Oh, they're the ones they call Christians. And disciples said, okay, he is the Messiah, and we are part of his group. We are Christians. We're okay with that. Now, the outsiders started using the term Christians, but as we crawl through the scriptures, you're going to find where Peter used the term one time. Listen what he says here in Peter. If you be reproached for the name of Christ, if you're being bad-mouthed, if you're being persecuted, hurt, people are treating you evil, right? Happy are ye. For the Spirit of glory and of God rest upon you. So when they're bad-mouthing and being, saying all sorts of evil against you, be happy, because that's when the Spirit of glory, it's on you, all right? And it says, and on their part, he's evil spoken of. So they're talking bad about Jesus. They're bad-mouthing our Lord, right? But on your part, he's glorified, because you take it well. So, but let none of you suffer as a murderer, or as a thief, or as an evildoer, or as a busybody in other men's matters. Okay? In other words, you talk bad about these kind of murderers and thieves, right? Evildoers. You talk bad about them. But don't be like that. Yet, if any man suffer as a Christian, this negative term they're calling you. So if they are, if you're reproached and they use that term, Christian, be happy about it. don't fall in the category of murderer, thief, evildoer, busybody. Don't fall in that category. But if you fall into this negative term, let him not be ashamed. You see, Peter's starting to say, yeah, it's okay that they call us that. We're going to, it's kind of like a country boy looking at another country. Oh, they called you a redneck. Don't be mad about that. Have you looked in the mirror? You got a redneck. Just let's go with it. But let him glorify God on this behalf. So it's as if God knew that the term's going to turn around and we can adopt it and not be ashamed of it. But that's not how it started. The other time it was used, King Agrippa, believest thou the prophets? Paul is in front of these two potentates, these two people in authority. King Agrippa, king over in Judea, and Felix is also the governor of the area. So King Agrippa, believest thou the prophets? In which he did. I know thou believest. He had a great respect for those Jewish scriptures. Our Old Testament, right? Their Bible. Then Agrippa said to Paul, almost thou persuadest me to be Christian. In other words, in the culture, we aristocrats have, as a satire, we call you this negative term. And he's saying, Paul, you are so persuasive, I almost took on that label. And that's it. They're called Christians in Antioch. Peter says, okay, if they're calling you a Christian trying to insult you, be happy about it. And Agrippa is just saying, yeah, you're so persuasive, I'm almost tempted to take on the term, to take on the title. And Paul said, I would to God that not only thou, but also all that hear me this day. That's it. But the term, the more terrifying term, the more descriptive term of followers of Christ was disciple. Acts 9. When Saul come to Jerusalem, he essayed to join himself to the disciples. He wanted to become a disciple. They were all afraid of him. They believed not that he was a disciple. Not a Christian. A disciple. A disciple is a learner, a pupil, an apprentice, a follower. A learner, a pupil, an apprentice, a follower. In that culture, disciple would be one of those people who just like, this is the guy. And when I want to know what to do, I ask myself, what would the guy do? When when he says something, before he even, the question is finished, before the words come out of his mouth, the answer is yes, I'm going to do it. Because I'm the disciple. Because I'm a learner, I'm a pupil, I'm a follower. So whatever is said, whatever is done, whatever is commanded, the answer is yes before the question is asked. Why? Because I'm a disciple. We're still going to use the term Christian, but we need to understand that if we're really followers of Christ, we need to be disciples. You can tell somebody, I'm a Christian, and they may think Bible thumper, homophobic, just critical, judgmental. They may think, oh, he got baptized when he was a baby. How sweet. But if you say, no, I'm a disciple, now you're telling them something. So, the question in John, by this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if you have love one for the other. That's what we do. We're not critical. We're not Bible thumpers. We're not judgmental. We're not homophobic. We love people, and we love one another. That's disciple. We're going to pick this thought up next week. But the question here, am I a mere Christian or am I really a disciple? That's a question for your heart, for you to look inside and decide, am I a Christian? Which, who knows what that means to any given person out there? Or am I a disciple? Which you know what that means. So, that disciple mindset requires something other. Or Christians, just a category. Father, I do pray that we would look inside, that we would truly ask ourselves what it means to be a disciple, a learner, a pupil, a follower, even an apprentice of the Messiah. So, Lord, I pray that you would speak to our hearts. Give us a determination to be a disciple. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Stand, please. Turn your attention to the screen this morning.